welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do or who you are actually. I learned that this last episode.
Okay.
Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Anthony Muisyo. I'm an artist and designer based in Nairobi. I have a wide-ranging palette of interests that I deal in. So graphic design, web design, apparel design, furniture design, and it's mostly just for my practice.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I do.
That's what you do. Who are you?
Who am I? 31-year-old Kenyan man based in Nairobi.
Yeah.
Really, really love the arts, hence my practicing the arts.
Right.
I enjoy spending quite a bit of time on TikTok, but I'm taking a pause for now.
Oh, really? Okay.
But yeah, that's just a quick intro to myself.
Okay. Maybe from there you can maybe share your journey through being an artist.
So my earliest memory with drawing or interest in the arts started when I was about 9 years old. Mm-hmm. At this point, I was basically tracing characters off of books onto paper, but I didn't really consider that art. Okay. And then years went by, I went to high school, and I started this small business where I was in a boarding high school, so I would buy blank, loose leaf paper. Right. And blank envelopes as well. And so I'd design and add Cupid and all that. And then I take this to school because now boys used to write letters to their girlfriends.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I'm like, you're the guy who used to do the calligraphy.
Yes. But I was using my computer at the time, so I'd do this on holiday.
Right.
So that was an extension of that art thing. And then immediately I finished high school. I started doing small posters and business branding. So a little kinyozi or a little saloon would come to me and be like, this is the name of my saloon. I need pictures and all that. So that was born mostly out of utility and business. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after, I started experimenting with expressing myself.
Right.
And now this was done primarily on Photoshop. Mm-hmm. And so I can say from about the time I was maybe 20, I now was fully expressing myself using Photoshop. Wow. And this now sort of morphed into my artwork being described as collage. Okay. So right now I describe myself as a digital collage artist. Mm. Yes. Okay.
And what has your journey been like in terms of evolving from being a hobbyist, I would say, as an artist to an entrepreneur?
So some context that I may have left out was that in uni I was studying electrical engineering. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I was not in class, I'm making my own little collages. Right. And then after uni, I decided to get a job. So I went down to Mombasa, worked as an engineer for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But in the midst of that, I would get commissions because, when I started when I was 20, I'm getting my first job when I'm around 25, 26. So there's 5 years of consistency. The work has grown. It's pretty articulate. And so now the commissions start coming in. Right. Hi, can you make this? Hi, can you make this? Mm-hmm. So I was doing this beside my 9-to-5 job. Right. But then come 2021, I was sort of done with employment. And so I jumped ship to actually pursue full-time a career in the arts and design. Okay. Yeah, so that's sort of how it progressed. So once I quit my job, it was now full-time art and design. All
right, so getting into that, what would you say are the challenges that you faced as an artist?
A big one I'd say would be lack of mentorship or guidance, because I primarily made my artwork in my bedroom. There was this concept of bedroom producers, the SoundCloud era. Yeah. I feel like I was the visual example of that. Right. But yes, just making your own work in your own room, and heavily relying on the internet. which was good because, the internet gives you quite some exposure and people can easily reach you. But in terms of the fundamentals, that was missing, and I wish I got more guidance in that. Right. I don't think doing pursuing a degree in the arts would have been as important in helping me grasp the fundamentals. But yes, I think if I worked under the tutelage of someone, sort of to understand, this is how you deal with clients, this is how you prepare an invoice, this is how you write a proposal, those kinds of things. So that took me quite some time to get to, because that's the admin part of my artwork right now. A client wants an invoice, a client needs a call, you need to write a proposal, etc, etc. So I sort of had to go through the longer path.
And how were you able to sort of just navigate that? Because I guess maybe a lot of artists now would ask, how do I get partnerships, brand deals? How do you position yourself in order to achieve those things?
I don't think there's like a silver bullet. Mine was purely just consistency. Because, if you start making work when you're about 20, 21, and you do that for, I'm 31 now, so that's 11 years consistently. It gets to a point where the growth in the work is very evident, and then now the commissions come. But also I think when I was starting out, I was pretty intentional with trying to develop my own visual style. The intention was not to set myself apart, but inadvertently that's what happened because of a very unique way of doing things. It sort of differentiated me from other artists. And then now when a client comes to you, they come to you for what you do or for what you're known for, which is my visual style. So I would say now in hindsight, it would be important to prioritize developing your own visual style or your visual language, because that's what the client comes for.
But then how do you navigate now putting yourself out there and saying, this is the work I do? Would you be interested? Where do you start? Who do you reach out to?
So, like I said, I earlier focused on Instagram a lot, and I would post there a lot. But I quickly realized that that's not a sustainable way of going about it. So I decided to approach my friends and offer to do work for them. So Hafare, the intro, I worked on a very early podcast cover. He was doing a podcast called Surviving Nairobi.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I designed the cover for that. And then I'd go to my musician friends. You have an EP, you have an album, can I do this? I'd be keen, rather I'd be intentionally not trying to ask for money from the get-go. But now, you see, if I do this, Hafare puts it out. So somebody will ask. If I do this for my other friend, they put it out, somebody else will ask. So I don't have to do the work of putting myself out there, but just by extending myself to my friends in my network also really helped me get out there. So sort of building those networks and relationships, and knowing when to ask for money, when not to ask for money.
Then I guess maybe that comes into the conversation about building a sustainable revenue model. What are some of the considerations you advise creatives to look at or consider?
I find myself to be in a bit of a unique position because yes, I will consider myself as part of the fine art world, but also early experiences with designing those small commercial posters helped me understand that I could use this very same skill to earn me money, right? So just to draw a parallel with the fine art world, you'll make your artwork, you'll show it in a gallery and then hope somebody buys, right? So there's a lot of variables in that picture. But if I approach this from a purely design perspective, design is very functional. Design is very, you're trading services, right? So that allows me to earn money because, I can design a logo, I can do a website, I can do all these things. These are skills maybe that I wouldn't necessarily have to rely on in my fine art sense, but in terms of design, there's somebody always wanting a website, there's somebody always wanting a logo or a cover, etc. So by being able to actually separate the two, helped me realize, oh yeah, you can actually have a sustainable business out of this. But I think it's also important to mention that business doesn't come that often.
For sure.
Yeah. I think after doing this over time, clients, build their trust in you. And then that's when now the sustainable or the recurrent business comes in, but it takes some time to break into that.
Yeah, for sure. So how would you diversify your income in that space?
So early on, when I started by saying that I do all these things, when I turned 30, I was like, okay, let's try and categorize these things.
Just maybe to deflect a bit, is 30 like a turning point for me?
I have no idea. It just came.
Yeah.
But I mean, I vividly remember having a meeting with myself.
Yeah.
Just after I turned 30.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. So what do we want to do for the next 10 years?
Right.
And one of the main things was to try and systemize my creativity. So like try and put it into buckets that can be sustainable. So like one of my goals is starting a furniture business, right? Because somebody will always want a chair, somebody will always want a lamp, somebody will always want something in their house. And so if I can put in the focus in finding a space, employing someone, discovering where I can get material, and then just start it as a system so that it runs by itself. You see, that's a nice way of thinking about diversified income.
Yeah.
Because, with that, all I have to do is design, and then there's carpenters who can realize that, right? As opposed to graphic design where it's me and me through and through.
Right.
So, just taking this a bit of a varied approach in thinking when it comes to business has helped me slowly craft the way it can be a sustainable, like a recurrent business.
And has it been able to sort of just integrate or cushion you during those tough months?
For sure. Like I recently I was so broke around December, and then
Not in December.
I know, the worst time. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, January is coming up and I'm gonna be so off. But then I get this email from this organization that was doing a music residency type thing, and they were like, "Hi, could you do 4 or 5 posters for us?" And I was like, "Cool, that's some extra income that has cushioned my January."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's moments like those that remind you that wow, yeah, the skills you do, there are people who would actually pay for that, and then now you can slowly get through the weird months. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, in terms of like tools and resources, what would you say have been the most useful tools that you've come across?
So my bread and butter is Adobe Photoshop.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I don't pay for it. It's a cracked version, and I take pride in that. In that it can be quite expensive, almost entirely out of reach.
Right.
And to me, it makes no sense that I've used a software for 10 years and then suddenly it's like $1,000 and then now I have to start paying. So that means I can't make work anymore. It doesn't make any sense. So Photoshop.
Yes.
Google Sheets.
Oh wow.
This is primarily because of project management.
Okay.
Because of all these things that I'm doing, I have to find ways of properly planning my tasks, tracking finances, which is the other side of the art world people don't talk about. The admin.
But actually, let's talk about that because you sound like a very structured creative. I'd like to think of myself as the same. Like spreadsheets are very important. If I'm planning anything, I have to put it on a spreadsheet. If it's not on a spreadsheet, it's not going to happen. But navigating the admin of it, how have you managed to sort of just get yourself into that space outside of being an electrical engineer?
I number one, stumbling into it, and number two, also just not having a choice.
Yeah, out of necessity.
So I'll give you an example. Last year I was designing a lamp.
Right.
And since I was doing this from scratch, I was exploring many things, right? It's I'm looking for material from Lake Victoria. I'm talking to people in Kariobangi to get aluminium and all this and all that. And so this process has taken me about 9 months to get to like a reasonable prototype.
Right.
And, within those 9 months, all these costs have been incurred. And so I immediately had to find a way of like tracking everything, because I've spent all this money just to develop a prototype, right? It's not even in the final phase. So I have to understand that that's almost like a research and development cost. So, without understanding or without actually tracking some of these things, I could end up wasting a lot of money, in pursuit of building something new. So I think it gives me a lot of visibility. And I think just as a person, I get very anxious if I can't see stuff. Like if I'm not seeing where the numbers are. It just feels like things are very ephemeral.
Very much in
and
the
that
ether.
Scares me.
Makes sense. What would you say are some of the hurdles you've like experienced outside of being broke? And how have you managed to overcome them?
I will start with being broke, because when you want to pursue a new idea and you don't have the capital, the bank is not going to loan you, right? And unless now you meet people like Hiva Fund, who are now giving grants to designers and creatives and everybody, right? That's one of the most critical things. So there I had to rely on friends and family to raise money. Other hurdles, I guess, would be mostly business mentorship, because I'm trying to strike this balance between getting lost in the creative process and running the business.
That was what we were going to get into, but let's get into it.
Because these two things are to run in concert. I need a good grasp of that. So business mentorship has been something that I am still looking for. But what other hurdles have been there? I think assembling a team has been tricky, because I can't bring a team on board if I don't have money to pay them. But a team is what you need to scale, right? So it's most like a chicken and egg problem there. I can't think of anything else right now.
If there's anything, what do you feel we have not talked about in terms of evolving from being an artist to running a business?
Maybe I can pose a question to you.
Okay.
For example, a podcast like this, do you think about it as a way to monetize, or is it more, or is investment goes into it without expecting return? Does my question make sense?
To an extent, but maybe you can rephrase it.
Okay. What I mean is, do you do this podcast with the intention of monetizing? And if so, how do you monetize? Or do you do a podcast like this more as marketing, like a marketing expense?
I think it's a double-edged sword, if anything. It is a platform for us to market ourselves and talk about the brand. But also, we're looking for ways to make money. Because at the end of the day, we're sort of imparting knowledge or educating the masses on what it takes to make it in the creative, culture and creative sector. And I think the value that it adds would definitely need to be monetized, because now we'd have guests like yourself coming in, or other people wanting to come on board and maybe pay to be part of the podcast and talk about it on LinkedIn or something, because there are people who are weird like that. But also brand association. So definitely monetization is also a key consideration for us, but heavy on the marketing and educating and using it as a platform to build on the community that we're building on as well.
Okay. Maybe one last thing I can say regarding funding and how to fund artistic projects for somebody who would be listening would be considering grants.
Right.
There's always call outs. Goethe Institute, British Council, TICA deal with culture and health and indigenous knowledge. So, one can find ways of packaging their project and using applications like those to realize it. Because let's say you don't have money, but these applications will ask you to put in a budget, a timeline, and all these things, and then if it's good enough, they grant you that. And so you're not stuck. It's very competitive, but it's still doable. It's a very
really
viable.
Just keep applying until you see who bites.
Yeah. You have to get used to the rejections. They used to break me a lot. Up until it just got to a point where it's like, okay, fine. Yes. What's the next one? You kind of have to move like that when it comes to these applications.
All right. Are there any other closing remarks that you might have?
Not really. Just thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here and making the time. So.